What is good, everybody? It is your boy Super Saiyan Cab here with some major update news for you guys regarding Xenoverse 2 today. Now, a lot of you guys know that we got original patch notes for Xenoverse 2 DLC Pack 10 that included around like 120 to 130 changes, I believe, if I'm remembering correctly. But that was not really everything that changed within the actual game. There were other skill changes that came that were not showcased in those patch notes, and there was also a lot of stuff about some of the skills that was changed that was not showcased in those patch notes as well. So that's what we're taking a look at today. This is basically the full-on patch notes for DLC 10, literally everything that has been changed, and it is so in-depth at the same time, as you guys will see throughout this video. So I want to give a huge shout out to the homie Demon Boy for putting this together. Now this is going to be part one. It's going to be a two-part thing because basically, guys, there are a total of 261 changes in total with everything that came this DLC. The patch notes only showed us about, I believe, 130, like I said, changes as far as skills go, and within those changes there were some changes made to characters that were very slight as well. So really it was only like 100 skill changes in total that were showcased, but right here we literally got 260 in total. Now you see he has not finished the ultimates yet. That's one reason we're gonna make this a two-part thing, but also because, I mean, 160 super skills is gonna take long enough to get through. So again, that is why we're gonna make it a two-part. Just go through all the super attacks today, and then once he finishes that on the ultimates, we'll go over that as well. But again, this video alone is probably gonna be at least 20 to 30 minutes. So let's jump straight into it. First and foremost, starting it out with Kamehameha. Kamehameha had an increased hitbox size on the base skill charge. Hitbox was previously the same size no matter what the charge stage. Pushback and pushback speed adjusted and increased when charged. The hitbox setup slightly adjusted to make opponent dropouts less likely. For those, basically, I've already read the patch notes, but all beam attacks, as you guys will see in a lot of attacks, were made to where your opponent has a lot less chance of dropping out. Like a lot of Kamehameha skills or any beam skills, really, if you hit them in like one or two hits would land, and for some reason they would drop out afterwards. It was just a very weird glitch, but it seems that they have fixed that. Now, bending Kamehameha had a slightly increased hitbox size, and then also the hitbox was set up slightly adjusted to make it opponent dropouts less likely and the skill easier to land. Super Dragon Fist increased the frames needed to pass before Z-Vanish as possible for each hit. So basically it is impossible to Z-Vanish out of the move at all at this point. And then also some audio changes were done to it as well. Then Instant Transmission shortened animation time by 30 frames, making the skill a half second faster. Calcutta Assault. Calcutta Assault had a lot of stuff changed to it, but at the same time, this is the depth that I'm talking about with this actual list right here of skill changes that you guys will get. As you see, it says skill will now only do the follow-up attacks after the first hit if the button input is used a second time. Skill will now drain X% of HP each follow-up hit after the first. Second hit will drain about 4.9%. Third hit will drain about 5%. Fourth hit will drain about 2.3%. And the fifth will drain about 1.6%. A complete combo will drain around 13.2% of your max HP, pretty much making the move a little bit ass in my opinion. Now, it also increased the frames needed to pass before the Z-Vanish, so basically you cannot vanish out of it. And then it says that the first attack increased HP damage by 4% when hit and blocked, 0.2%. Decreased HP damage of the hit when blocked of the second attack when blocked by 0.01%, and also increased stamina damage from 18 to 25. I didn't even know this move had stamina damage. The third attack is decreased HP damage of hit when blocked by 0.1%. It also increases stamina damage from 27 to 35. The fourth attack had its stamina damage increased from 36 to 50, and the fifth attack had its stamina damage increased from 60 to 100. So all in all, if I'm reading this correctly, does this move like take 2 bars of stamina from your opponent now when you actually use it without them vanishing out of it? Is that what like I didn't even know that the move had stamina damage from the beginning. But moving on to Calcutta Kamehameha, Calcutta just had the slight hitbox increase, and then also the hitbox was adjusted so opponents will not be dropping out. Riot Javelin had the tracking adjusted, making the skill easier to land. Tyrant Lancer also had the hitbox position and timing moved slightly, and then the tracking was adjusted to make the skill easier to land. Key Explosion increased the number of possible hits by 9. This effectively increases the damage by about 21% for a full use. And I did notice that when using Super Key Explosion, it is a much better move after the DLC 10 update. Times 10 Kamehameha. Increase the hitbox size on base skill charge, so now the charge and the beam will actually grow as you charge it up. The stage 3 charge, increased number of possible hits by 1. This effectively increases damage by about 5%. And increased number of possible hits on stage 4 charge by 1, also increasing damage by about 3.3% on that in particular charge. Now Super Afterimage, excuse me right there. Super Afterimage, increase the speed and shorten animations, making the skill faster. Increase the travel distance when using directional inputs. Decrease travel distance when close to targeted enemy. This makes it so you can keep vanishing behind / in front of your target, so you can activate the skill back to back more easily. Now there's a bug with it. He says it is possible to repeatedly vanish in back of / in front of your opponent when using your last bar of key of the skill if you are close to the target. This is done by rapidly pressing the input for the skill when close enough to your opponent when your key runs out. The bug will be cancelled if the opponent moves or you get hit, so it's largely harmless and doesn't accomplish much if done. So it's really just a glitch that seems like you can do in like photo mode or something like that. Because if the opponent moves, the glitch cancels, then again, what opponent is just going to stand still. But moving on to Super Godfist, guys, we have added extra conditions to the skill, making it easier to hit target. Increase speed and improve tracking, make it easier to hit target on knockback. And then we also had some cosmetic changes, changed effects slightly when hitting target on knockback as well. Then we have charge. Startup jump now has a hitbox. Decrease damage of the final hit to be the same as others. Increase knockback time and before Z vanish, making it unvanishable in the middle. The addition of the new hitbox effectively gives the skill a 20% damage boost if all 3 attacks land despite the damage nerf on the last hit. You can no longer hold the input delay on the attack after jump. And then cosmetically, the effects timings change slightly, and landing final hit will add a slowdown, giving the skill a visually more of an impact. Now there are also some side notes. It says the skill has the entries in it for delaying the attack after the jump. It's just in a different area in the skill's code, making it possible to activate due to change in placement instead of deleting it entirely. The removal of delay input might have been unintentional. Now moving on to consecutive energy blast, the tracking was just made better to make it easier to land. Kamehameha had the hitbox size increase and also made to where you cannot drop out of it anymore. Masenko increased the hitbox size by 80%. That was kind of crazy to me when I first read it. But hitbox lingers for 6 frames longer now as well. The tracking was adjusted, making the skill easier to land, and then also they adjusted the effect timing slightly as well. Menacing Flare was just the tracking had its tracking adjusted, made easier to land. Super Dragon Flight adjusted effect timing slightly on that move, that was all. Light Grenade had its tracking adjusted along with adjusted animations, making them transition into one another more smoothly. Evil Eyes hitbox appears 15 frames sooner now. The hitbox activated at frame 32 before, it now appears on frame 17. Hitbox is now 12 frames longer. Hitbox lasted for 5 frames before, it now lasts for 17. It has improved hit detection and an increased hitbox size by 16.6% as well. Dust Attack had an adjusted effect placement, don't really know what that means. Orin Combo though had an adjusted hitbox position and knockback strength on each attack, making the skill easier to land, and adjusted the knockback angle on the final hit. Overall skill files reworked so the attacks connect and flow together more easily. That's very good to hear. Destructo Disc, guys. Hitbox size reduced by 50%, adjusted hitbox position slightly. The tracking was adjusted to make the skill easier to land and increase projectile speed by about 50% when close to the target as well. Super Destructo Disc had its tracking adjusted to make the skill easier to land. Key Blast Thrust, again, tracking was adjusted to make easier to land. Fake Death adjusted the animation slightly so they blend together better. So I'm assuming that was supposed to say. And then Tri-Beam, Double Sunday, and Saturday Crash all had their tracking adjusted to make easier to land. Shining Friday's increased hitbox lifetime by 30 frames, makes it harder for other attacks to cancel out the Key Blast. Cyber Beam and Murder Grenade both had the tracking adjusted to make the skill easier to land. Gallic Gun had the increased hitbox size on the skill charge state, along with making it impossible to pretty much drop out of. Flash Strike and Finish Breaker also both had the tracking adjusted to make it easier to land. There's a lot of skills that had tracking adjusted to make them easier to land, but then there's a lot of skills like Shine Shot right here where there's a bit of depth to the actual change. Now it said the skill can now be activated while guarding an attack. It is now possible to fly/step cancel the skill after 44 frames after the projectile fully leaves your hand. Opponent can now escape more easily when hit. Sledgehammer. Remove slowdown after breaking an opponent guard with a charged hit. So basically you're going to be able to go into stuff a little bit faster. Earth Splitting Gallic Gun had its increased hitbox in size, and it was also adjusted to where your opponent won't drop out easily. Same with Raccoon Eraser Gun. Crusher Ball had a tracking adjustment to make the move easier. Crusher Ball, yeah, had the tracking adjusted to make the skill easier to land. Saucer Blade had a hitbox setup slightly adjusted to make opponents less likely to drop out. Milky Cannon was also adjusted as far as tracking to make the skill easier to land. Death Crasher, same thing, tracking was adjusted to make it easier to land, so basically you can use this move off knockaways, things like that, and it'll work for you all day, every day. Death Slicer was also adjusted to make the skill easier to land. Now Death Psycho Bomb had an increased hitbox by 60%. The tracking was adjusted as well, and then slightly adjusted the effect timing and placement of it at the same time. Death Wave had a hitbox adjusted so the attack connects more easily up close, reduced the opponent stun when hit from 30 frames to 5 frames, and then the hitbox speed increased slightly to be more in line with the visual effects. Crazy Finger Shot was adjusted to make it easier to land, which I really don't understand. It was already very, very easy to land. And then it says added new effects when the skill collides with stage environment. Really curious to see what that is. But Burning Attack increased damage of first hit by 133. What, nani? This is an overall 40% damage boost from it before if it fully connects. Increased the projectile speed by 43%. Tracking adjusted, making skill easier to land as well. Added a new camera angle on skill startup and slightly adjusted effects when the skill collides with the stage environment. That's kind of crazy. I'm gonna have to check that out. Now, Shining Slash, the tracking was adjusted to make it easier to land. Finish Buster increased the damage by about 60%, increased projectile speed by 50%, and removed the slight projectile slowdown and drag. This makes it move at a constant speed. Now, honestly, Finish Buster may be a pretty good move at this point in time, I'm not gonna lie. Moving on though, Double Buster was just adjusted as far as its tracking to make it easier to land. Final Cannon decreased the damage on the final attack by 25%, increased damage on final attack when blocked by 50%, increased stamina of final hit damage by about 122%. It made it go from 27 to 60, and increased knockback time from 40 frames to 60 frames. Side Bridge adjusted the hitbox position to better match the effect, decreased hitbox size by 50%, and the tracking was adjusted also to make it easier to land. Flash Bomber decreased the pushback by 50%, makes it continue. Excuse me, I just burped right there, pretty nasty. But decreased the pushback by 50%. It's made easier to continuously hit enemies, and it adjusted the effect and projectile position slightly. Now the next three all have the same thing. Their animations were adjusted to basically look better on large characters. That's Drain Charge, Supercharge, and Hyper Drain. Power Blitz had the tracking adjusted, making the skill easier to land. Endless Shot increased projectile speed by about 44.5%. The hitbox size was increased by about 100%, and it decreased the pushback by about 85%. Makes it easier to continuously hit enemies, and the adjusted hitbox to more easily hit aerial and knock back opponents. Now the tracking of that was also adjusted, making it easier to land. Same goes for Perfect Shot. That was the only change that came there. Now Justice Rush had an increase of the damage of the 9th hit by 100%, increased damage of final hit by about 33%, and this gives the skill an overall around 16.6% damage increase. Now moving on to Eagle Kick, it decreased the enemy upward knockback by 140%, changed target stumble type. So what I'm assuming from that is it means that your opponent will stumble instead of being knocked back now. That's what I'm getting from that. At the very least, still something I would have to test out on my own to see for sure. But it also added in 22 frames or 22 iframes to skill startup, increased animation speed of the kick after the startup jump by 25%, increased forward momentum by 10 times, and it is now possible to cancel the end lag of this skill with other skills, attacks, or movement options. So honestly, Eagle Kick is sounding a lot better after the DLC 10 update. But moving on, guys, we have Hot Charge, increased damage of palm strike by 33.3%. This gives the skill an overall 25% damage boost if it fully connects. Decreased damage when blocked slightly, increased stamina damage slightly, and decreased palm strike hitbox by about 75%. And the tracking was also adjusted, making it easier to land. Innocence Cannon and Go Go Gum along with Ill Flash all just had tracking adjustments done to make them easier to land. Majin Kamehameha had an increased hitbox size on the base skill charge, just like regular Kamehameha did. Basically everything for this is the same as regular Kamehameha, with the hitbox making opponents less likely to drop out. The things that changed though is at stage 2 charge increased the number of possible hits by 1, effectively increasing it by about 5.7%, and at stage 3 you increase the number of possible hits by 2, increasing the damage by about 10%. Now, Vanishing Ball had an increased damage by about 21% while in purification form, decreased knockback of final hit by 76% while in purification form, and as far as the tech changes go, it increased the speed throwing animation by about 166% while in purification, and then the tracking was adjusted to make the skill easier to land. So honestly, while in purification, the move is absolutely insane. Now, honestly, purification is a bit insane, as you guys will see from these next moves right here though. Quick Sleep, increased health regen by 50% while in purification form, increased stamina regen by 20% while in purification. Then we got Pearl Flash, which had an increased damage by 25% while in purification, and increased stamina damage by 25% while in purification as well. Skill will now guard break target when fully charged while in purification form. Tracking was adjusted to make the skill easier to land as well, so when just normally you can use this off knockbacks and things like that. Now, Die Missile Barrage, guys, the increased speed of the final projectile by 50%. Final projectile now does damage as well, and the tracking was also adjusted to make easier to land. Galactic Donuts and Super Donut Valley, Super Donut Volley, both had their tracking adjusted, making the skill easier to hit. Big Bang Attack had an increased hitbox size of fire projectile by about 41%, increased startup animation speed by 21%, and the tracking adjusted made the skill easier to land. So basically you can use this move off of all knockaway attacks now. Now, Split Finger Shot, guys, got a lot better. Honestly, yes, it says decreased damage of each projectile by about 50%. Projectile gives the skill a 11.2% damage increase for a full combo. Wait, what? Decrease, maybe he meant to put increased damage of each projectile by about 50%, because at the end it says projectile gives the skill about a 11.2% damage increase for a full combo. Change projectile properties. Projectile homing now starts immediately. Adjust the speed of each projectile so that they will now track and home in on the target sequence. When used at close range, projectiles will not spread out and will instead immediately home in on the target. Blaster Cell had a decreased damage of first 4 projectiles by about 33%, and the final one by about 8.3, giving it about a 25% damage decrease, which I really don't understand. But the tracking was made easier, so it will be easier to land. Gigantic Omega, again, tracking made easier, so the skill's easier to land. Gigantic Slam, this is for Broly only. Anything where you see parentheses, it only applies to that character. And with Broly, the hitbox was decreased by 70%, or about 70%. Freezing Beam just had tracking adjusted to make easier to land. Burst Attack for Nova Shenron had improved projectile homing, increased pillar hitbox size by about 14.2%. Projectile will now cause knockback, and the tracking was adjusted to make the skill easier to land. And now for the CAC, everything was the same, but for some reason your homing got a reduction as opposed to Nova Shenron had an improvement. I don't understand why they did that. That is a little bit weird to me, but it is what it is. Now moving on though, guys, we got Burst Reflection here. The tracking was adjusted, and it adjusted the visual effects and timing slightly. Dragon Flash Bullet along with Whirlwind Blade both had tracking adjusted to make them easier to land. Present for You had a damage decrease by about 42.8%. And then Rage Saucer, honestly guys, Rage Saucer had a lot of changes to it. Increased the hitbox size by about 50%, increased stamina damage of the first set of attacks by about 3 times. Improved tracking of teleports, speed up attacks by 150%, decreased frames of each set of attacks from 130 to about 30. The final hit of the first 2 strings of attacks will now knock back target, remove the ability to switch lock on during skill use. Cosmetic Changes, adjusted the sound effects used and timing slightly, adjusted timing and visuals of effects, adjusted the camera angles to each string of attacks, adjusted animations to better blend together, added camera shake to the final hit of the last string of attacks, and added a small time of slowdown to the final hit of the last string of attacks. Like a ton of changes, honestly, right there with that one move. But moving on, guys, we have Meteor Crash, made so you basically cannot Z-vanish out of it. Burst Charge, increase the key charge startup by 85%, decrease key charge slowdown rate by about 33%. Beam Rifle, increased damage of second projectile by 14.3%, increased damage of third projectile by about 28.6%, giving it about 14% damage increase for a full use. Tech-wise, the projectiles had a reduction to speed by 12.5%. They removed projectile homing, and the tracking was adjusted to make the skill easier to land as well. Moving on though, guys, we have Infinity Explosion. The hitbox size of stage 1 was increased by about 37%, stage 2 by about 33%, and stage 3 by about 15%. Increases speed of one stage charge explosion and second stage charge explosion by about 40%, and decreased speed of full charge explosion by about 20%. Android Kick had an increase to its damage by about 66.6%. Increased the stamina damage from 81 to 50. I didn't even know moves in the game did stamina damage before. Like, that's crazy to me. But the tracking was also adjusted, making the skill easier to land. Phantom Fist increased stamina restoration from 20. What? I didn't read this far down. Are you saying that Phantom Fist is going to give you a bar and a half of stamina? Please don't tell me that. That's nonsense right there. Player will now always face the opponent after vanishing, and reduced iframes by 10 as well. Strike of Revelation, increase the damage by 20%, increase stamina damage. What's up with all these stamina damage things? I'm gonna have to see if these moves are actually taking bars of stamina, because this is crazy. Jesus. But moving on, guys, we have Finishing Blow. The damage was reduced by 50%, but it also added in 16 iframes to the chop animation, and it is now possible to cancel the attack into other super skills if the skill hits the target, and the skill will now teleport to target on knockbacks as well. Elite Beam and Elite Shooting both had tracking adjusted to make them basically easier to land. Life Absorption, which is Self's first form skill, he had an increased health restored by 66.6% when you use that. Burst Kamehameha, just like the other Kamehameha, had the hitbox increased in size, and then also was adjusted to where you will not fall out of the attack anymore if you are hit by it. Counterburst had an increased hitbox size by about 39%. Focus Flash had an increased hitbox size of projectiles after the first attack by about 33%, and the tracking was also made better so you can make the skill easier to land. Wild Hunt, the skill will now teleport to target on knockback. Emperor's Edge, the increased damage by 30% on this move. Rocket Punch had a reduced opponent's stun time by about 25%. The tracking was also adjusted, and it is now possible to cancel the animation after the teleport with other skills, attacks, or movement options. Moving on, guys, we have Rocket Tackle, improved the teleportation to the target on a knockback combo. Eye Beam, projectiles come out 9 frames faster now, increased startup iframes by about 9 frames. Tracking adjusted to make the skill easier to land, and it is now possible to cancel the end lag of non-input skill use with a guard attack combo or other movement options, as well as the end lag of an extra input skill with other skills, guard attacks, or other movement options. Now moving on, guys, we have Android Rush, the increased damage of the follow-up attacks by first hit by about 66.6%, giving it an overall 57% damage increase for a full combo. It adjusted the knockback and hitbox position, which makes it easier to land. Faint Crash improved the teleportation to target on knockback. Destructive Ray, tracking adjusted, making the skill easier to land. Super Explosive Wave increased the hitbox size by about 80% and increased the maximum number of hits from 7 to 10, effectively gives the skill about a 16.3% damage boost for a full combo. The tracking was also adjusted, making the skill easier to land. Kill Driver had an increased hitbox size by about 25%, and the tracking was adjusted to make it easier to land. Sudden Storm had an improvement to the tracking on projectiles. Rockshadow's Claw had an improved hitbox size by 43%, and the tracking was adjusted, making the skill easier to land as well. Same goes for Punisher Drive. Again, they just made it easier to land. Now, Super Mad Dance had a lot go into it, to be honest, guys. The hitbox changes, adjusted damage on transform skill input, increased stamina damage on first and second attacks from 10 to 20, increased damage on third and fourth attacks by 40%, and increased stamina damage on third and fourth attacks by 10 to 35, increased damage on final attack by 25%, and increased stamina damage on final attack from 10 to 50. So you're trying to tell me that if you fully land this, you're taking like almost 2 bars of stamina from someone? Like, that's absolutely insane. I really have to test this out. This gives the transform skill input a overall -20 or a overall about 23% damage increase for a full combo. The tracking was also improved on the final hit of left or right direction skill input. Darkness Eye Beam, on the other hand, had an adjusted hitbox, so the skill can no longer hit more than once when guarded against. This skill doesn't do more damage than expected once successfully blocked. The tracking was also adjusted to make the skill easier to land. Dynamic Finger had the tracking adjusted to make it easier to land. And for the mouth cannon, all of them, along with the evil roar while you're in Giant, the damage was increased by about 200%. Like, honestly, Giant might be very, very good at this point in time. But the Doria Headbutt, guys, tracking was adjusted, making the skill easier to land. Chaos Shot increased the number of possible hits of held skill input from about 10 to 15, giving the skill an overall damage increase of about 45.5%. It also decreased the projectile speed of held skill input. Now, Gallic Cannon had the slight increase in hitbox size, along with making it to the point where you cannot drop out of it. Time Skip Flash Skewer had screen effects and visual checks changed and adjusted slightly. Time Skip Jump Spike adjusted animations to look better when used on large characters. Destruction's Concerto Comet, and get ready for all these destruction moves because a lot of changes came to them. But basically, increased damage on place projectile by 50%, increased damage on final hit when used with Destruction's Conductor by about 108%. The tracking was adjusted, making the skill easier to land, decreased the movement speed of place projectile by about 43%, and it is now possible to cancel the last 10 frames of animation into attack skills, a key blast, a guard, or other movement options. And then it also increased the knockback duration of the final hit when used with Destruction's Conductor from 40 frames to 70. Jesus. Now moving on to Starfall, guys. Starfall had an increased damage of place projectile by about 150%, increased hitbox size of projectiles when used with the Conductor by 40%, increased place projectile lifetime by 40 frames. Lifetime is how long it'll stay on the map before disappearing. Increased speed of projectile when used with Destruction's Conductor by 25%. Increased opponent knockback duration of final hit when used with Conductor from 10 frames to 55. Adjusted the speed of each projectile when used with Conductor so that they will now track and home in on the target in sequence. And it is now possible to cancel the last 10 frames of the animation into attacks, skills, a key blast, a guard, or other movement options. Destruction's Concerto Meteor. Increased damage of place projectile by about 66.6%. Increased damage of projectile when used with Destruction's Conductor by about 433%. Increased hitbox size of projectile size projectiles when used with Destruction's Conductor by 70%. Increased place projectile lifetime by 90 frames. Decreased spread speed when used with Destruction's Conductor by 66.6%. When used with Destruction's Conductor, initial projectile will now split into 5 projectiles into a plus pattern before the projectile would split into 2. So honestly, this move is sounding kind of crazy, but it is now possible to cancel the last 10 frames of the animation into attack skills, a key blast, guard, or other animations. Conductor, all that was changed for this was the hitbox appears 11 frames later than before. Increased knockback time from 48 frames to 64. It is now possible to block this skill. The skill will now regen 50 ki when used. The animation speed was increased by about 16.5%, and it is now possible to cancel the last 25 frames of the animation into attack skills, key blast, guard, or other movement options. God of Destruction's Roars, stamina damage was increased by about 100%. God Splitter had an increased hitbox size of non-input projectile by 100%, and the tracking was also adjusted, making it easier to land. Heavenly Arrow had a decreased projectile damage of by 20%. The melee damage was decreased by about 26.6%, and the stamina damage of the melee attack was reduced from 20 to 12. And then the tech changes the increased projectile speed by about 16.6%, and it is now impossible to Z-Vanish out of this skill. I was going to say it's possible to Z-Vanish out of that. Okay, Divine Retribution, Trap Shooter, Reverse Launcher, Spirit Stab, Blades of Judgment all had tracking adjustment to make the skill easier to land. Psycho Barrier had an adjusted and changed effect to the visuals. Lightning of Absolution also had the tracking adjusted, but also decreased the key from 200 to 100. And then Light of Justice, Spiral of Condemnation, Candy Beam, Petrifying Spit, all made easier to land with their tracking. Data Input had an adjustment to its adjusted and changed physical effect visuals. And then Handy Cannon and Brave Sword Slash also had a tracking adjustment made so where they're easier to land. Moving on, we have Power Impact. The hitbox size was increased on the base skill on size on base skill charge. Hitbox was previously the same size no matter the charge, and excuse the brain fart right there, I could not read for a second. But the tracking was also adjusted, making it easier to land. Confusion Blade, Energy Minefield, and Soaring Fist for Ultra Instinct Goku, all tracking was adjusted for all of those. Ultra Instinct Goku's Kamehameha had an increased hitbox size on base skill charge, increased damage of hits between the first and last stage. Last hit of stage 1 charge by 33.4%, effectively giving it about 14% damage boost. On the stage 2, you're getting about a 16.7% damage boost. Increase the damage of hits between the first and last hit of stage 3 by about 33.4%, and then increase the number of maximum hits on stage 3 charge from 13 to 15, giving you about a 30% damage boost for this and the above. Now the hitbox is set up slightly adjusted to make opponent dropouts less likely, just like regular Kamehameha. Now reverse shot, guys, decrease damage when opponent guard the ki blast by about 85.7%. Increased knockback time of the final hit from 10 to 40 frames though, and the knockback angle and speed changed, allowing for better combos. So revenge final, or actually variant drive, before we move on to that, decrease the time before opponent can Z vanish from about 80 frames to 40 frames, allowing the opponent to Z vanish out of the skill more easily. Revenge final flash, increased damage of hits between the first and last by 25%, decreased damage of final hit by about 41.6%, and then increase the number of hits of maximum hits from 8 to 11. This is an overall 16.4% damage boost. Full length charge, increased maximum hits from 22 to 29. This is an overall damage boost of 45%. Full length charge 1 critical HP, increased number of maximum hits from 37 to 40, giving you about an overall 67% damage boost to the move. Now Super Mad Dance, he did this twice. I noticed this before, but one thing he did not add in was here at the bottom. It says this gives the transform skill input an overall 23% damage increase for a full combo, but again, this was already showcased before. Now moving on to Big Bang Kamehameha and Gigantic Charge, all both were adjusted, making the skill easier to land. Final Flash, this is for Vegeta because it says the super attack. We don't have the super for our CACs, but basically a hitbox was increased in size. The maximum number of hits went from 21 to 24, giving it a bit of a damage boost at about 11.7%, and the tracking was adjusted, also making the skill easier to land. Now Atomic Blast greatly reduced the startup time for charges skill input by about half, and the tracking was also adjusted, making the skill easier to land. Now those are all 160 skill changes that we've gotten as far as the super attacks goes, guys, and you should see the depth that the man really put in with a lot of these skills, like went full in depth and gave us everything that literally changed with them at the same time. And also, if you really think about it, the other patch note, including some changes that came to characters and mentors and things like that, only had but 100 and something, like 130 changes in total. This man already got 160 just off of the super attacks alone. There's still all the ultimates and evasives to go. So huge shout out to Demon Boy once again. If I did not say it before, this will be linked down below in the description for you guys to check out. I'll have his Twitter link down below as well. Please show the man some love. He really deserves it for all the work that he puts in for the community. So let me know what you guys think about all this down below in the comments. But as always, man, thank you guys so much for watching. Hope you guys enjoyed. Until next time, hope you guys have a good day. Peace, y'all.